styles, everyday finds, one place. Welcome to Shack Shop, your go-to online store for women's fashion and must-have essentials. From trendy outfits to lifestyle items you didn't know you needed, it's all here. Easy shopping, great prices, new arrivals dropping often. Shop smarter. Shop Shack Shop. Visit us online today.
California's already volatile race to succeed Governor Gavin Newsom has taken a dramatic and legally complex turn as one of the Democratic Party's most recognizable figures finds himself at the center of a residency dispute that could derail his political ambitions altogether. Representative Eric Swalwell, long considered a leading contender for the state's top office, is now facing a lawsuit that alleges he does not meet California's constitutional residency requirements for governor. The legal challenge claims that Swalwell falsely represented his living situation on official election documents, raising questions not just about eligibility, but about trust, transparency, and the integrity of the electoral process. At the heart of the controversy lies a deceptively simple question with enormous political consequences. Where does Eric Swalwell actually live? The constitutional requirement at the center of the storm. California's Constitution is explicit about who may run for governor. Article 5, Section 2 states that any candidate seeking the governorship must have been a resident of California for at least 5 consecutive years immediately preceding the election. The rule is intended to ensure that the state's highest executive officer has deep, continuous ties to California, not merely political connections, but lived experience with the state's economic, social, and cultural realities. For decades, residency challenges have surfaced sporadically in California politics, but rarely have they targeted a sitting member of Congress who has represented the state for more than a decade. That is precisely why the lawsuit against Swalwell has sent shockwaves through political circles in Sacramento and beyond. The lawsuit that sparked the firestorm. The legal action was filed in Sacramento County by conservative activist and documentary filmmaker Joel Gilbert, a registered California voter, who argues that Swalwell's candidacy is constitutionally invalid. Gilbert's petition for a writ of mandate names California Secretary of State Shirley Weber as the respondent and seeks an order preventing her from certifying Swalwell as an eligible gubernatorial candidate. According to the filing, Swalwell has allegedly misrepresented his primary residence, listing a Sacramento address that Gilbert claims is not a home at all, but a law office associated with the congressman's campaign attorneys. The lawsuit goes further, alleging that Swalwell's true residence is not in California, but in Washington, D.C., where public mortgage records reportedly describe a large, high-value property as his principal residence. If proven, Gilbert argues, the discrepancy would render Swalwell ineligible under the state constitution and potentially expose him to accusations of filing false statements under penalty of perjury. A mansion in Washington and questions about principal residence. Central to the lawsuit is a 6-bedroom property located in northeast Washington, D.C., valued at approximately $1.2 million. Publicly recorded documents cited in the complaint indicate that when the property was refinanced in April 2022, it was listed as the principal residence of Eric Swalwell and his wife Brittany Watts. The couple reportedly lives there with their 3 children. Gilbert contends that the designation is not a trivial technicality. Mortgage documents typically require borrowers to specify whether a property is a primary residence, secondary residence, or investment property. Misrepresenting that status can carry serious legal consequences. The lawsuit frames the issue bluntly. If the D.C. home is truly Swalwell's principal residence, then he may not meet California's residency requirement. If it is not, Gilbert argues, then the mortgage documents themselves could be problematic. Either the paperwork in Washington is false, he has stated publicly, or the paperwork in California is false. Both cannot be true. No California property on the record. One of the most striking claims in the lawsuit is the assertion that Swalwell does not own or lease any residential property in California, based on available public records. According to the filing, searches of property and leasehold databases show no evidence of Swalwell holding a current residential interest in the state. The lawsuit further notes that Swalwell's congressional financial disclosures spanning more than a decade reportedly list no California real estate holdings. That claim stands in stark contrast to Swalwell's long political identity as a Bay Area lawmaker who has represented parts of Alameda County since first winning election to Congress in 2012. For many voters, the idea that a long-serving California congressman might not actually live in the state raises uncomfortable questions about modern political life, particularly for federal officials who spend much of the year in Washington. The Sacramento address under scrutiny. When Swalwell filed his California Form 501, the official candidate intention statement required for gubernatorial hopefuls, he listed an address located in a high-rise building in downtown Sacramento's Capitol Mall area. Gilbert's lawsuit claims that the address corresponds not to a private residence, but to a business suite used by legal professionals, including attorneys affiliated with Swalwell's campaign. The form is signed under penalty of perjury, and Gilbert argues that listing a non-residential address constitutes a material misrepresentation. Election law experts note that while candidates may sometimes list mailing addresses or campaign offices for correspondence, residency declarations are treated more strictly when constitutional eligibility is at stake. Swalwell's political profile and national prominence. Eric Swalwell is not a marginal figure in American politics. A former prosecutor, he has built a national profile as a vocal progressive and one of former President Donald Trump's most outspoken critics. Over the years, Swalwell has championed aggressive gun control measures, expanded federal oversight of domestic extremism, and progressive immigration policies. He has been a regular presence on cable news and late-night television, using his platform to argue that Trumpism represents a fundamental threat to democratic institutions. That prominence has also made him a frequent target of Republican criticism and of controversy.
The shadow of past scandals. Swalwell's career was significantly impacted in 2020 when reports surfaced about his past interactions with Christine Fang, also known as Fang Fang, a woman later identified as part of a suspected Chinese intelligence influence operation. Fang reportedly cultivated relationships with multiple California politicians and briefly assisted with Swalwell's 2014 re-election campaign before disappearing from public view. Although a subsequent House ethics review resulted in no formal charges or sanctions, the episode cost Swalwell his seat on the House Intelligence Committee and continues to follow him politically. Critics argue that the Residency lawsuit fits into a broader pattern of questions about judgment and transparency, while supporters counter that Swalwell has already endured extensive scrutiny without wrongdoing being established. A campaign launch amid celebrity endorsements. Swalwell officially announced his gubernatorial campaign during a late-night television appearance in November, positioning himself as a defender of working-class Californians struggling with high prices, housing costs, and economic insecurity. High-profile endorsements from progressive celebrities quickly followed, reinforcing his image as a nationally recognized figure with strong ties to Democratic donors and activists. His campaign messaging frames the race as a fight not only for California's economic future, but against the return of Trump-aligned politics at both the state and national level. Yet the Residency lawsuit now threatens to overshadow those themes entirely. A crowded and competitive field. The Democratic primary for governor is already shaping up to be one of the most competitive in recent memory. The field includes prominent figures such as Representative Katie Porter, former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, and other well-funded candidates with deep political networks. On the Republican and independent side, several candidates are positioning themselves as alternatives to Democratic dominance in the state. If Swalwell were removed from the ballot, it could dramatically reshape the dynamics of the race, redistributing donor support, endorsements, and voter coalitions. The role of the Secretary of State. Ultimately, the lawsuit places significant responsibility on Secretary of State Shirley Weber, whose office is tasked with certifying candidates for statewide office. Gilbert's filing urges Weber to exercise what it calls her constitutional duty to enforce eligibility requirements, warning that failure to do so could undermine voter confidence and ballot integrity. Legal experts caution that residency disputes often involve nuanced interpretations of intent, physical presence, and documentary evidence, and that courts have historically been reluctant to disqualify candidates with clear and compelling proof. Swalwell's silence and a confrontation at a town hall. As of this writing, Swalwell has not publicly responded in detail to the allegations. Gilbert claims he attempted to raise the issue at a recent Swalwell town hall event in Southern California, but was escorted out before he could ask a question. According to Gilbert, campaign staff intervened after recognizing him. Whether that account is accurate or not, the incident highlights the sensitivity surrounding the issue and the campaign's apparent desire to control the narrative. What happens next? The case now moves through the early stages of the legal process, where judges will assess whether the claims merit further action. If the court agrees to hear the case on its merits, it could force the release of additional documents, sworn testimony, and potentially a definitive ruling on Swalwell's eligibility. Even if the lawsuit ultimately fails, the controversy may linger, providing ammunition to political opponents and raising doubts among undecided voters. In a state where housing, residency, and identity are deeply intertwined with political credibility, the question of where a candidate lives may prove just as consequential as where they stand on the issues.